Many of you know that I'm a yogi, and I practice a couple styles of yoga. One is an actual physical form of yoga, like what we see here in the West, where we have on our tights and our mats and we're doing down dog and tree pose, is one form of yoga. But I'm also a Bhakti Yoga, and Bhakti is the yogic path of love and devotion. And so it's through this path of love and devotion that took me to India with one of my teachers. And I'd been to India previously, so I knew somewhat what to expect when I got there. So I was traveling with a teacher, Dr. Douglas Brooks, who's a Sanskrit scholar. Sanskrit is the ancient language of India, and he's a professor at University of Rochester. And he is one of the world's leading experts on a particular tradition of practice and ritual in southern India. So we were going to southern India to the state of Tamil Nadu and traveling with him. So to prepare for the trip, and it was 17 days long, and each day we visited one or two or possibly three different temples. So it wasn't a tourism trip as much as it was a sacred trip to see how in India the Indians practice yoga. So the word yoga comes from the root word yuj, Y-U-J, and yuj means to yoke or to unite. And the practice of yoga, in whatever form it manifests, is to unite the individual with the divine. And so whether you can do that, practicing down dog and tree, or whether you do that through chanting or you do it through prayer, there's all these different paths. So to prepare to see how the rituals of southern India are practiced in the temples, we had 9 months worth of phone calls where we talked about how we would dress in the temples and what we would wear. And so every time we went to temple, we had someone traveling with us to dress us in saris. And the saris are the most beautiful silk cloths. And I'm sure you've seen them on before, but it's 24 yards of fabric. If you just unfold it, and you held it and I held it, it's just a long piece of fabric. And it represents the long spiritual tradition of ancient India. And some of the older women will even wear saris that are like 30 feet long to talk about the long lineage of their life and the long lineage of the practice of yoga and the practice of darshan in India. And so darshan is the ritual attending of temple where they show one of the deities in form. And so you go to the temple and you go into the inner sanctum of the temple, and there's a viewing. They open the curtains and the priests have prepared a murti. A murti is a statue, so like a statue of Shiva or a statue of Kali or a statue of one of the gods of India. And then as you look and view, the murtis, the statues, are thought to be infused directly with divine energy. So you're receiving a blessing as you look at the statue or as you look at the murti. So we would dress in the traditional saris, and we were told to wear gold chains around our neck because the gold represents the purity of your heart in attending the darshan. And when you go into temple, you go with all of your senses awakened. So in southern India, you wear bangles. That's where they come from. Because the bangles, can you hear them? And the bells awaken your senses. You wear fragrant flowers in your hair to awaken your senses to the smell of the incense. You have the buttery, silky feel of the sari against your skin, so that when you go into this experience, you are fully awakened and ready to receive. So the third day of our trip, the first day was buying saris, finding the right jewelry, preparing to go. The first temple we went to is the temple that you're seeing in the picture. It's in Chindambaram. And what's so significant about Chindambaram is in the inner sanctum of the temple, they've been practicing rituals every day for over 1,000 years. It's just incomprehensible. And so the temple itself is quite large. It's like a city block. So there's 4 sides to it that make a square. And much like our ritual at the beginning of class, there's a gate facing each of the 4 directions. So you can enter the temple from any of the 4 directions. Big stone pillars hold up the temple. And when you walk in, you go down, 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 down the stairs. And If you've ever been to Fiesta, the crowds at Fiesta are nothing compared to the crowds at the temple during temple season. So as you go in, our guide is saying, count 27 steps. When you hit the bottom, turn left, because there are a sea of people that you're surrounded by. And if you make one misstep and you're sorry, like you're going to be trampled. So we go into the temple and you go down, and the easiest way I can describe this is it's like there's a racetrack in a square at the bottom of the temple. That's like the lower level. And then the next level starts about here, and it's stone platforms. You could kind of sit up on the stone platform if you could get that high. And so people could be down in the lower level or up in the higher level. And then the priests were in the center in the inner sanctum. So the ritual that we went to see was a special festival that only happens once a year, and it's the time that they take the murtis, the statues, out of the temple to be viewed by everyone. And it's significant because when you go to temple, you only ever see the front of the statue, you never see the back of the statue. And so they take these murtis out, and they put them on a 2-story wooden cart. The only thing I can say is, if you could imagine Raiders of the Lost Ark, kind of like that, okay? So they go out on a cart, and it takes all day to go around the square of the temple. Everybody, the businesses are closed, everyone is out, everyone is celebrating just to get a viewing of these statues. In order to get them out, the cart is like 2 stories high. You can imagine an old type of wagon with a long tongue. And the way it makes its way around the square is that people walk it. And then they set it down, and another group of people come. And it's quite a blessing to be able to actually walk the cart. The night before this festival happens, we were invited into the temple with thousands of other people to see how they get the statue from the inside to the outside. So you can imagine something brass as bigger than me, how heavy it might be. And they put it on a little shrine or platform that has a top on it. And then there's a dikshitar, who's a priest. There's a priest on the front, and there's a priest on the back to guard the statue. And then it's hoisted up on these poles, 30 feet long, like these long logs, one here, and then like a 20-foot pole here, and then on top is this shrine. And it's carried by about 30 priests, 15 on each side. And they're all wearing traditional dress, which is a long white skirt. Now, if any of you have ever tried to walk in a long skirt, you can kind of get a picture of this. And as they're hoisting it up, every single one of them looks like it's the heaviest thing that they've ever held in their whole life, and it's only for the grace of God that they're getting this statue out, around the racetrack, and up the 27 steps to the outside. So at any moment you think, oh my gosh, they're going to drop it. And they're shouting to each other in Hindi. Of course, we don't know what they're saying. And the one saying that our teacher said, you have to know this, and I can't remember what it is now, but it's like, fire, watch out, fire, because behind this, a guy is running with this huge metal pyramid with pots of fire. He's like, if you hear this, get out of the way. So it's total blissful chaos that's occurring inside the temple. And so we're down in the racetrack, and we're ready to watch this. And so they start 30 men, 15 on each side, with it on their shoulders, start to carry it down. And they kind of have to do like a 3-point turn inside the temple to make their round and get the momentum to go up the stairs and out to the festival. And our group gets split up. Now, it's so crowded that, remember the stone platform, that as you move back, you can't go back any further. There are so many people there that you can't move. I'm sure you've been at a concert or a festival or something where there's just that many people. So we're watching, and it's coming down, and I'm calculating this 3-point turn, and I'm realizing that those 30-foot long poles are coming right towards me. And there is no place to go. There's no place to get out of the way. And these guys are holding it, and they're shouting in Hindi, and I'm looking, and I'm calculating this, and they're moving, and they're shouting, and I think, oh my gosh, they're coming right towards me. I can't move. There was a young gentleman in front of me, a little bit taller than I am. And I could tell he was not calculating the three-point turn in the same way that I was. And we're told when you go into the temple, do not touch any men. Never reach out and touch a priest, whatever you do. So we had all these rules, and I thought, if I don't grab this man and pull him, he's going to get hit by this pole. Because it's, it's about this high. So they're coming, they're coming, they're coming, and I look up and grab him, and I pull the two of us down to the ground, and sure enough, the whole cart swings and goes right over our head. And I stand up, and my friend that was traveling with me, she said, you should have seen, your eyes were this big, and you were just totally white. And in my Western mind, I thought, I could have died. There's no first aid. I would have to be like helicoptered out of here. This is significant. So I'm having this moment of panic in my mind in the middle of this temple, in the middle of this ceremony. And there's so many people. The guy I pulled down, I never even saw him again. And I turn around and I see an Indian woman that's obviously a local villager. And she looks at me, and she doesn't speak English. And we were the only Westerners for 17 days. We saw no other Westerners at all. And she looks at me and she bobs her head. And I'm thinking, yeah, you saw, I almost died. And she's like, yeah, you almost died. That could have been horrific. And then she's still looking at me and she's kind of making eyes. And I'm thinking, I know, this was really intense. But what she was actually saying is, your sari has fallen down. And it's exposing the left side of your shirt, which is, forbidden in the temple. And so finally she reaches over and she grabs my sari, pulls it up, tucks it in. She wasn't worried at all that I almost died in the temple. That probably would have been a huge blessing. But she was very concerned that my sari was not properly tucked in on the side. And so she tucks my sari in, and then she joins her hands together and she looks at me. And in that moment, it was like one of those moments you see in a movie where two people look at each other, and in the back there's total chaos, but nothing else is seen. And what I saw in her eyes when she looked at me, she said with her eyes, I appreciate that you've come halfway across the world to visit my temple. And I can see that you've done your best to dress in the right attire and wear the right accompaniments and accessories and to be here. But don't you realize that the light you seek is within? I mean, I could have gone home the next day and been perfectly fine. Then she bowed and walked off. And I realized halfway across the world, in the middle of total chaos, I could have just gone to Celebration Circle. I didn't have to come all the way here. It's so true that the light that we seek is held within. So for the remainder of the trip, we visited a variety of temples where there was chaos, maybe not as much, and you would go in and you would see the viewing, and it's still held within my heart that what I got most out of the trip, and I'm realizing now, it's 5 months ago, it was in December, that that's really probably what the teacher, my professor wanted me to see, is that it's not about the ritual, it's about the devotion of the practice. And so there's, in the style of yoga, there's a mantra that I have said for 17 years, and we chanted at the beginning of the class, and it says the same thing. There's only 4 lines to it. Om Namah Shivaya Gurave Satchitananda Murtaye Nishpra Panchaya Shantaya Niralambaya Tejase. And it says, I bow to the light, the true teacher within and without, the auspicious one. I bow to the light. The second line, Satchitananda is 3 words put together. Sat is truth. Like the truth that we seek is held within that light. The truth is the answers to the questions that we ask, like, what is the meaning of life? Where do I go after I die? What is my purpose and intention in life? Chit is consciousness. It is you and I have taken on the form of the divine, and so have all of the 2-legged, the 4-legged, those that swim and crawl, the trees, the rocks, and the grasses, all hold that divine consciousness. And Ananda, Satchit Ananda, Ananda is pure bliss. It's the radiant joy and happiness that exists within us always. The third line, Nishpra Panchaya Shantaya. So it says, you take the form of truth, consciousness, and bliss. Niralambaya Tejase says it's always present. The light is always present, never absent. Even when you go through times of trial and tribulation, even when you feel so stuck into your own darkness, the light has never left you. It's always carried within you. And it sparkles with a divine luster. This is the sparkle that you see when you look into someone else's eyes. That's the Tejase. That's the divine light that's carried within each of us. So all along, I knew that the light was within me, but I had to see it in someone else's eyes reflected back to have a remembrance of that. On the last day of the trip, we were at a different temple in Chindambaram on our way to the airport, and it was a Kali temple. Kali is the vibrant mother goddess of time and destruction, and she wears a ring of skulls around her neck, and she destroys evil by chopping off the head of evil. So the color associated with Kali is red. So you go into the temple and there's kumkum powder, which is placed at your third eye. It's a red powder made from plant material, and it's just everywhere. And the darshan, the viewing of Kali, she's got like neon lights and flashing light bulbs, and it's just, it's very Kali-like. And at the end, they pulled our group aside, and a priest came over. And the priests are generally born into this role. And so I'm sure he had been a priest at that temple his whole life. And he was an older man, and his hands were stained with red, and his feet were just permanently stained with red. And he came to each of us, and he tied on this red ribbon. And then he walked away. There was no ceremony. And I never asked anybody, why did the priest tie a ribbon around my wrist? So I decided it was up to me to assign it its own true meaning. And so when I look at the red ribbon that's now been there every day since like January 1st, it's a remembrance that the light is within me and the light is within you. And you could do the same thing. You could go home and tie on a ribbon, or maybe put on a bracelet that you don't wear very often and start to wear it every day as a reminder of that divine light. So before we meditate, as we close, many of you know from practicing yoga that the closing is namaste. Namaste, I bow to the divine light within you. I bow to the divine light within me, and when our lights touch each other, we become one. And so I'm going to invite you to say namaste maybe to each of your neighbors and look into their eyes and see the reflection of their divine light shining back to you. So, namaste.